We're going to start this puppy up. Clear, prop.
And welcome back to Tip of the Week. In this part of building your Affordaplane, we're going to talk about making our metal gussets. Now these are the parts that actually hold the framing of our fuselage together. There will be one on each side, so we'll be making these in pairs. They're made out of aluminum, 1/8 inch or 0.125, sometimes you'll see that on the back. And it's important you get the right type of metal. It's in your plans, but it's called 6061 T6. This is one metal you do not want to substitute because the gussets are very important in holding everything together. So the strength is key. You're probably not going to run into another aluminum that's stronger. You might, but there's a good chance if you substitute you'll run into one that is weaker. So make sure you get the 6061 T6. 6061 is actually pretty popular. It has a lot of very nice qualities, and we can actually look those specifications up if you want to read up about them. They're actually quite interesting, but anyhow, you need to buy some. Looking at the plans, it looks like we need at minimum 12 square feet to get all of the gussets done. Now, if you make mistakes like I do and you cut it wrong or you calculate something wrong, you're going to have some wasted pieces. So 12 square feet is a minimum. Feel free to get more than that. Where to buy this? All sorts of places. There's national providers of aluminum stock, and then there's also a lot of local providers in your town depending where you live. But the idea is to get this as inexpensively as possible. The price per foot, which is usually the way this is sold, varies greatly for the exact same material. It's almost like buying gasoline. In one part of the country it's really high, and in another part it's really low. It's actually the same gasoline. There's no difference. Same with this stuff. So if you're getting your 6061 T6, shop around. Here's the catch. You may find a place that has a great price on this, but how does it get to you? If it's not local, it's going to have to ship. And shipping is another one of those crazy things. Turns out that if you were to buy a 4x4 sheet, that's 16 square feet, which is a very common dimension to buy a sheet of aluminum goods in. 4x4 tends to be quite expensive to ship. So you want to always check if you're buying this online and having it shipped to you. Most reputable places will allow you to put it in your cart and then put in your zip code and see how much it costs. So ultimately, you're looking for the lowest cost, including shipping. And I don't have much advice beyond that because I've been purchasing aluminum for quite a few years, small quantities, enough for aircraft, etc. And I have found that there is no one single supplier of aluminum that you can always say, there I'm going. I've gotten close to that, but for example, one of my favorite places to buy aluminum is Aircraft Spruce. They have some great prices on the type of aluminum that is commonly used in the construction of aircraft because they're in that business and they buy very large quantities. The problem is their shipping would not win any awards for pricing. You have to be very careful that you compare purchasing a 1x2 square foot piece of aluminum versus a 4x4 sheet because the price for shipping doesn't just jump by. It really increases a lot. So shop around. Onlinemetals.com is another place I purchase from. Always check locally, because if you can buy locally, if you live in a city where they stock this or even make it, then you don't have to pay shipping at all. And you're the winner in that case in most cases, because you drive down there, pick it up, and shipping is essentially whatever it costs you to bring it home in your car, or whatever the case is. So we'll leave it at that, but basically you need minimum of 12 square feet. Feel free to get more than that so that you can experiment with cutting and you have room for mistakes and whatnot. You can buy it as small as a 1 by 1 foot square. This makes shipping very affordable. In fact, one of the suppliers, Rose Metal Products, in I believe it's Missouri, ships through Amazon or through them directly. And in the case of Amazon, shipping is included. I think if you purchase from Rose Metal Products directly, they also include shipping. So again, when you evaluate, does this 1 square foot piece actually make sense, make sure you determine if shipping is included or not. Why don't you just buy 12 or more square foot pieces and get the best value? Because some of the gussets we're going to make are larger than 1 square foot. You know, about half of them are not. So you don't just want to buy 1 square foot pieces, but certainly you can for making a bunch of them, or for experimenting, or if you just want to buy 1 or 2, or you run out of aluminum and you need to buy another one. And of course, the same principles are going to apply when it's time to buy your tubing and your angle, etc. Of course, there you have another issue. You're getting very long lengths, 10 feet, 12 feet in some cases. And if you're familiar with carriers like UPS, anything over 8 feet is a big problem. So even if you just want 1 stick or 2 sticks of aluminum tubing and it has to be 10 feet or longer, UPS is not going to be your friend as far as an affordable way to get that to you. So for this part, we're only going to produce gussets, and we only need our sheet of 6061 T6, 1/8 of an inch. Let's get started. So the first step in getting started with your gussets is to fire up your computer and locate the gussets on your PDF file, and then you're going to print a page right from your electronic plans. And I'm using this as an example. I like to print on cardstock. This is more than just paper. It's a little bit thicker. And what's nice about that is you're going to end up cutting this out, and by having some thickness, it's going to make it easier to trace around. I obviously already cut this out to show as an example. You also want to make sure when printing that you select the option that says to print actual size. And you can always confirm that by noticing the dimension and using your ruler and actually measuring that your printer in fact printed to the proper size. And in some cases, these templates are going to have multiple sheets when the gusset is larger than the 8.5 by 11. So everything is printed off on standard printers, 8.5 by 11. The only difference is I'm using thicker cardstock available at any office supply store, and that seems to go through printers just fine. We're going to be printing off. These are all PDFs from your electronic plans. And we're here up at the engine mount at the very front, and a gusset will fit right here to tie these 2 tubes together, and that happens to be the letter B gusset, and that will fit right like this. Now our next step is to carefully cut this out right along the edges. Let's go do that. And that will provide this. And of course we're going to make sure that all of the edges are contained. If anything, we want this to be inside all of our edges. So error on the smaller side of the gusset. In other words, we don't want the gusset hanging out over the edge of the tube. That would create a sharp lip of sorts. We want it maybe slightly smaller. And if you find that your angle is off for any reason, you can trim the paper so that it matches. But ultimately, we want this to match and be inside our lines. Now, this is an example of a gusset that fit on one page, and that's very nice. And once we're happy with this, we're going to carry this over to our aluminum and transfer it there. And I have selected a piece of aluminum because this is a 90 degrees here, and this was the corner of a sheet of my 1/8 inch aluminum. I can very carefully match up the edges, and then I'm going to draw the line around this. And by using the cardboard, it makes it a little easier to have a guide for the pen. Let's take a quick look. So that looks fine. And then our next step before we go any further is we need to mark these holes. And for that I'm going to use my punch. You can get these at Harbor Freight. This is spring loaded and it snaps and provides an impact. So making sure I have my template in place, I'm going to punch into the very center of each of these holes. You can eyeball the center, and if you want to give it, you can give it a couple of, and if you look very, very closely, you can see those marks in there. Here, 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 like that. That is important. Now we can go cut this out with our bandsaw. Just in case you're dealing with a sheet of aluminum that is way too big to fit into your table bandsaw, then simply use a hand jigsaw to cut the piece into a manageable size that will fit in your bandsaw. From our Department of Sweeping Generalizations, bandsaws that are set up for cutting wood will generally do a pretty good job on aluminum. Everybody has different equipment, so you'll have to do your own experimentation and research. Now, we're going to clean this up on either the sanding belt or the Scotch-Brite wheel. Now, anytime we cut a piece of metal, we're going to leave our cut marks on the edge. And these are created by the bandsaw, for example. These edges need to be smooth. In other words, we need to sand down these edges until they are essentially shiny and you don't see the cut marks. The reason for that is that these cut marks are like deep scratches, and that's where a crack could develop. Remember, an airplane is full of vibrations, and when you have a small crack in the edge, that could propagate if there was a concentration of stress, and that could theoretically start a crack. So I'm going to take this to our sanding machine and get these edges smooth. Now, if you really want to get fancy and nice, this is a Scotch-Brite wheel from 3M. They're a little pricey, but this goes onto a bench grinder. It is made for aluminum, and it's made to really dress the edges of aluminum very nicely. It will definitely make things shine if you take the time. So this is another technique using a Scotch-Brite wheel and, of course, eye protection. It may be hard to tell from looking here, but it does a very nice polish job on those edges. We will take our new cut piece and test fit it back in its location, and that looks good. Now our next step is to locate the marks we made with our punch and drill those out to about 1/8 of an inch or smaller. We want some small pilot holes in each of the little dimples we made with our punch. And if we forget, of course, we had 4 here and 4 here. Okay. Now, our next step is to make an exact copy of this right now by tracing this onto another piece of aluminum. I'm going to put the B on here so we don't get this mixed up. All right. Very important, next step is to make a second one of these, right? There's going to be one on each side of our tubing. So I have my scrap piece of aluminum here. I'm going to carefully line it up. I want to make an identical piece in size because this will be on the other side of our tubes, and of course the size and the shape have to be the same. So take your time and outline another piece. And there we go. Now I'm going to go cut this piece out and clean up the edges, and then don't set this aside. We're going to label this B, but then we are going to transfer these holes very carefully. These two are going to end up being a matched set. So let's cut it out, clean up the edges, and then we'll come back and duplicate these holes. And here is my new piece and the old piece, and came out just fine. So they are identical, almost. Now I'm going to label this one on the back, flip it over, and this is a B also. And the reason I put it on the other side is so that it will be facing outward. Because remember, our tubes will go in here, and these will go like this. So we got B, and we got B. Now, this one needs holes. So what we're going to do is carefully line these up so that they are perfectly the same on all sides. Take your time. And then, when you have it just right, you're going to mark one hole. You can use a punch, or I'm going to use a pen. And there you go. We are going to hand drill this one hole, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, there's the one hole I drilled, which matches up with that hole very nicely. Our next step is to attach our first Cleco. Now, if you haven't used these before, This is a Cleco. It's a spring-loaded device which has the purpose of holding two pieces of metal together temporarily. This is a Cleco plier. These are used throughout the aviation industry when working with sheet metal products, and also automobiles too, because there's a lot of metal involved. And this is a spring-loaded Cleco. Now, remember, I asked that you drill 1/8-inch holes or smaller. You want to drill up to 1/8 inch. That's the size of the diameter of the hole we used here. And this copper-colored Cleco is made for 1/8 inch holes. And when you look at it, this part out here protrudes and then retracts under a spring power. So the way we work this is, we take our top piece, I'm going to squeeze the pliers, stick it in the hole, and notice how it holds because of the expansion over here. But now, the purpose is to join these two pieces together. So all I have to do, take that out, is line up the two holes, squeeze the pliers, and insert into the hole. And what that has done is very securely held these two pieces together. I mean, that's almost as good as a nut and bolt. A lot of strength there, and holds it very tight. The reason for that is that we can now go drill the other holes without worrying about this piece shifting. Now I'm going to drill one more hole over here and put another Cleco in there. You want at least 2 Clecos to hold these together while you drill the other holes. I use a block of wood because I don't want to drill into the table. And the Cleco does have a little nub that sticks out there, so it's nice to get it off the edge of the wood. But I can go ahead now and just drill another hole over here, making sure that these pieces are lined up. This is the last time we have to be very careful in making sure that the pieces are lined up. But now I can go ahead and drill, for example, right here. Okay. And now I can add another Cleco. They get tarnished after a while, into the other hole. And that goes in like that. Now there is no way these two pieces can shift amongst each other. And I can go ahead now and drill the rest of these holes. And what we have then are two pieces that are identical, with the holes being very accurately transferred from one piece to the other. So that when these two gussets are placed on each side of the tube, we have our holes matched from one side to the other, and that way we get a very precise hole. And by having replicated the holes identically on both pieces, you don't need a drill press to create the hole that's going to go through that 2-inch tube, which is going to be in between these two pieces. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of these holes. And there you have it. Two pieces, identical. So this is matched hole construction, two pieces, and we're all set to move on to our next set of gussets. So we need this pair, matched hole, created for the rest of the aircraft. Now here's an example of a gusset that will not fit on a single 8.5 by 11 sheet. Notice it's marked not full size, so you know right away. The dimensions for the full size are here, 12.5 inches from here to here. Obviously that's not really 12.5 inches. So you will find several more sheets labeled F, like this one that says full size, and this one that says full size. So these are going to go together in such a way. You might say, well, how do you get these exactly right? Well, that's what this is for. You assemble these correctly, you will get 12.5 inches from this edge over to the center of that hole there. So you use this for your assembling these two. So step one, I'm going to cut these out carefully and then tape them together in such a way that it matches the actual dimensions here. Scissors, please. And I have taped the two pieces together, and the way I know this is aligned properly is that if I use the straight edge from the end and measure from the center of the bolt, we get our 12.5 inches, which is confirmed, of course, by our sheet here. And we can put this in place and see how it looks. Once you have completed all 10 pairs of these gussets, matched pairs, you are then ready for the next part. Let us know in the comments if there's anything that hasn't been clear about these instructions. And there you have it. So in our next part, we're going to put these gussets to use and start dealing with some square tubing. So yes, we're going to start needing our 2x2 tubing in our next section. Back to building.